I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Livestock and Grain Market News, here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending April 13th, where we had feeder cattle selling unevenly steady, kind of all over the board. It had more to do with what part of the week the sales occurred in, where at in the country the sales occurred in, and how bad the market was last week, because we had sharp losses last week. We came into this week, a lot of pressure still early in the week, but trading was real slow early in the week, partly because of the sharp losses last week and people were just a little bit scared to sell cattle, and partly because we had Easter Sunday, not a lot of cattle shipped in over the weekend for those Monday sales. So the week started out kind of slow, under quite a bit of pressure, and then at midweek we started seeing some things turn around there with a little bit more support. You know, guys come in wanting some cattle, and it just kind of varied. Like in Kansas, they had real sharp losses last week in their major yearling sales there. This week saw some pretty big gains on those losses, so the market rebounded quite a bit. You know, over in Colorado, they had mild losses last week, and in through the middle of the week they had mild losses again this week. But it was kind of a yo-yo thing, but started to kind of straighten out there by the end of the week. And then at the end of the week, which our sales normally kind of toned down there towards the end of the week, but we had sound footing in the feeder market by the end of the week. The board showed a lot of support there on Thursday, with most all your out front fall contracts going into next year up the limit after some pretty stiff losses earlier in the week. But you know, I think we kind of come down and found a bottom, and maybe found a little support all through the week this week. And on feeder cattle, your market through the end of the week was about unevenly steady, and on calves it was steady to $3 lower. Still some losses, and those orders that came in were not nearly as strong through the southeast, and a lot of the calves that we're seeing this time of the year are pretty much new crops, and a lot of your fall calvers don't wean and maybe don't use as good a manager practices as they do on your bigger spring calving outfits. And just most of the grass orders are filled. Most everybody's got the cattle that they're going to turn out. They started so early, they were afraid there weren't going to be any numbers at all. They really wanted the stocker cattle rather than the soft calves, and most of those orders are filled up, other than some little small deals. Maybe your guys that have little acreages there behind their house or something, your weekend warriors, I like to call them, that have a job in town but like to run a few cattle too. They're still picking around, but for the most part your big grass orders are all filled. But your feeder cattle market and the marketing and the trade this week kind of followed along on your fat cattle market. You know, everybody was still sick from last week early this week, and then they come out on Tuesday, and I actually sold a handful of live cattle at $1.19 this week on Tuesday, because everybody was just afraid the market was going to be so much lower. And it looked like at one point on Tuesday there, and maybe early Wednesday, that it was going to be another a good basis week. We had some early sales early in the week dressed at $1.92, but you know, by Wednesday that thing had kind of turned around. It became apparent that packers needed cattle. Most of your live sales were $122 to $123. Your dress market was mostly $194 to $195. But then on Thursday we still had regional packers and a little bit of a major trading higher than that. You know, had sales come in through mandatory reporting as high as 201 on a dress basis up in the Nebraska and Iowa area. You know, and so that's a good strong cue for next week's trade. The guys are just hoping that this feeder market just took a little correction here, caught its breath. You know, fundamental factors are still really good, and hopefully the investors that are not really in the cattle market but put money in the board, hope they kind of come back, especially if we start to see more of those fundamental factor data start to come to the surface, and it'll give them a little more security on investing money in that board. But packers are struggling. You know, they've got cutouts at 177. They're buying dressed cattle. This week's weighted average is going to be around 195. That's a long distance in between there. Some of these packers are just kind of going, you know, hand to mouth, really short bought there, and it's going to be a struggle for them for a while until we get into grilling season. Something happens to make these dressed beef values and retail beef sales really pick up a lot. But we saw some good rains across the country this week in places that really needed it. You know, Texas Panhandle got a big rain in areas there. You know, they had to shut the highway down between Amarillo and Dumas this week because of big rains around Fritch, Texas, places like that, 4 or 5 inches of rain, and just haven't had a rain like that since anybody can remember. And the water just kind of made its own path, headed to Lake Meredith, and a lot of times over the highway. But that'll help a lot. You know, Flint Hills pastures, a lot of them been burned off, and get that quick growth on the blue stem out there, and cattle are showing up there every day being unloaded all through that grazing region there. And so we're about to wind down on the feeder cattle marketing for the summer months, and when weather warms up, you got cattle turned out, and you got cows out, and you just don't have a lot of marketing going on until we get to the summer yearlings. So we're probably going to see some real tight receipts at most of your auctions, and not a whole lot of direct trade either for a while. But this week's regional weighted averages in the north central states: 7 to 800 pound steer cost you 150, 185, compared to 150, 359 last week and 135, 87 a year ago. Down the south central states, 6 to 700 pound steer cost you 160, 316, compared to 160, 478 last week and $140.94 a year ago. Down the southeast, 5 to 600 pound steer cost you 168.19, compared to 167.37 last week and 143.51 a year ago. That wraps up your markets for this week. Check out our website at marketnews.usda.gov. From the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri. We'll talk to you next week.